Welcome to Positive Personal Power with hope, aspiration, and encouragement. Our goal is to build and enhance people's confidence and strength to handle life's challenges. Now, let me introduce you to your host, Nathaniel Skula.
Super. So today I'm joined by Mike Tobin again.
Again?
No, it's a pleasure, Mike. It's a pleasure. And also Andrew Strauss, who's also got an OBE as well. So I'm sorry, I haven't got one of them. And I haven't got an MBE either, but there we are.
Well, that's something for you to aspire to in life. Maybe one day you might get there.
Well, I'm trying.
We've all got to have targets in life, you know. So just keep plugging away with them free hugs. You'll get one eventually.
Yeah, I'm wearing a free hugs t-shirt, and I can't even give those away at the moment. But there we are. So here we're here to talk a bit about your cricket. Obviously, your cricket career has been phenomenal, and I've got one question to sort of kick off with. I mean, did you like dream of being captain of England cricket or being a cricket player when you were a kid, or what made you sort of end up there?
But yeah, you used to make that sound like that's something odd to dream about.
No.
No, I did. I think I did dream. Look, I loved all sport growing up. So, if it was a cricket season, I dreamt about being an captain. If it was the rugby season, I thought about, I wanted to be, I don't know, Will Carling or whatever. And if I was playing golf, I wanted to be Tiger Woods. So, that's what kids do, don't they? There's one thing dreaming it, and there's another thing it actually happening. And I still pinch myself sometimes to how fortunate I was to get to the top and then have a long England career. I was very lucky, and very fortunate. I mean, I have literally lived the dream, which not that many people can say they've done.
That is pretty cool. It
is.
Well, it's. I suppose you're right, because everyone does have that kind of. I know when I was a kid, I wanted to be a footballer and all that sort of stuff, right? And then, as time goes by, I think in your early time, you've got to be exposed to it enough, and you've got to have a sort of push behind you in a way, or a supporting structure. Do you think that was more present in your sort of early days? Well,
look, I think I was slightly unusual in the fact that I didn't specialize on cricket early. I was never part of the sort of, England age group sides and all that sort of stuff. So I was, I think I was fortunate when I look back on it in that I had a very normal childhood and I played loads of different sports, and obviously I was just at school. I think where I was abnormal was that I was lucky enough to go to a private school. So, we had all these sports on tap, and because I was at a boarding school, I could just go and, play in the nets whenever I wanted to. And so I think that on reflection made quite a big difference. And increasingly, I think most sports are grabbing players with potential quite young now, probably too young actually, but, 11, 12, 13, 14, suddenly you're on a pathway. And actually, if you haven't put in the amount of time by that stage, it gets harder and harder to make it, I think.
Well, my son Nelson, right? And he's obviously he's 6'4" now, and he's quite, he's bulking up, and he's focused 100% on a career in rugby. And I was talking with one of Eddie Jones's staff, and they were saying that, again, by sort of 10 years old, they look at certain bones in the body, and they decide at that point, based on length, I think it's the upper leg bone or something, that they can decide at that point whether they're going to put some effort into that player or not. And I think that's just unbelievable. It's just, how do you even kind of compete with that? Now, there are rugby players that have kind of bucked the trend and got through anyway, but that's generally the kind of sifting process. It's starting at that age. Really.
And I think in cricket, for fast bowling, they do that to a certain degree as well. Like, there are very few fast bowlers that aren't, well, at least 6 foot, but, preferably 6'4", 6'5". So I suppose if you're in talent identification, you got to look at what to focus on. But I totally agree with you. Like that, there should be some outliers in that, and we should be prepared for there to be some outliers as well, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, and hopefully, hopefully there's also the sort of the room for people to play for fun as well, right? Because we're sort of talking about the ones that are like yourselves exceptional at their sport, but there's a lot of people on a Sunday or a Saturday or whenever that just play because they just enjoy it. And they enjoy the beers as well.
Sorry, carry on.
Well, I was going to say, you must have had a bunch of people that kind of were around you at certain points that have kind of faded away and dropped off, that you thought, if he'd have just stuck at it, he could have been up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were always a lot of players better than me, at any level I played, actually. And I think, I suppose, look, as you get nearer the top, actually, it's different skills that you have that come to the fore. So, for me, temperamentally, I was good. So, I was pretty calm and composed. And so as the pressure ramped up, I think I was more able to deal with it than other people. And then also just, the higher the level you go, the better you need to be off the back foot. So that was another strength of mine. So it's interesting, different levels, different strengths sort of tend to appear. I think that the ones that don't make it, they tend to fall into one or two categories. One, they just don't want it enough. So they're just not prepared to put in the hard graft really to get to the top. And number two, almost, I think they get found out. There's one fatal weakness, whatever that might be. You know what I mean? Like it could be you can't play spin, or you're not good against fast bowling, or you don't like being away from home for long periods of time, or, mentally, temperamentally you're not right. So there are all these sort of filters you need to be able to find a way of jumping through. And I was never very good at anything, but I never had a fatal weakness, I think.
Oh, that's quite interesting. So perseverance and resilience, I guess, generally are pretty fundamental, aren't they? We had David Nashy on the other day, and he was saying that, he used to get very stressed before a big match, to the point where he would even feign an injury if he felt his confidence was lacking. And I think, again, that his kind of weakness on that one was his self-confidence.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think actually that whole sort of performance anxiety thing is prevalent right the way through the world in different guises, and it could be the person that doesn't want to get up in front of other people and do public speaking, or it could be someone that, has got that sort of imposter syndrome that, I don't know why I'm in this job and I'm not good enough for it and all that sort of stuff. And certainly, international sport at the top level is such a brutal environment, in the sense that if there are any weaknesses there, they will be exploited. So mentally, it's a tough journey to go on, especially when you're not in good form and whatever. And so there are two things about that. Firstly, the people that naturally can find a way of keeping themselves calm have an advantage, but also the environments that are willing to spend some time and effort on the mental side of the game, I think, prosper through that. They get a lot of benefit from it. And obviously that whole thing of sort of caring for your people. And, because David's reflection would be that he never felt comfortable talking to anyone about that. So he kept it all bottled up. Yeah. And that's where it sort of came out sideways in the end.
Yeah. Do you think that calmness is something that's benefited people like Alistair Cook, for example?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I mean, he was a guy that, calmness, I think temperamentally he was very calm and unaffected, but he was also very resilient and quite stubborn as well. Like, he didn't like someone getting the better of him. And he was able to concentrate very strongly for long periods of time. I think that was, again, he was a guy that technically wasn't brilliant. He would never go down as one of the most beautiful batsmen of all time, but he scored more runs than anyone in the history of English cricket. So there we go. says it all, really.
That's brilliant. I love that. Technically, I wasn't brilliant. I thought greatest run player.
He won't mind me saying that.
I'm sure he won't. I'm sure he won't. I mean, when you get that many accolades, people can say what they like, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
So it's interesting you mentioned imposter syndrome, right? Because that's like a massive thing, isn't it, right now? So when did you think, like, did you ever have that problem, like that you had that imposter syndrome, or not?
I did when I started playing professional cricket, because I just, I got effectively a contract with Middlesex, having just had a couple of trial games, and so I found myself sort of elevated into this professional cricket world, and I knew deep down that I was nowhere near that level yet, and so I was pretending to be at that level, but I wasn't. So deep down, I was quite insecure about my abilities at that stage. I think by the time I got to international cricket, I'd kind of been there and done that domestically for quite a long period of time, and I felt, when I looked at my record versus others that had played for England, I felt I was up there. So I had a bit more sort of deep-rooted confidence at that point. But certainly, like, I think where I struggled a bit was when I was playing against the greats of the game, like a Shane Warne or a Muralitharan or someone, and you're facing him thinking, he's just much better than me, which is a horrible place to be. So you're kind of like just hoping to find a way of getting your way through it. But I was up for the fight, I was up for the challenge, I suppose, and that stood me in good stead.
Awesome.
Super.
So that resilience, I guess, has come into play quite a bit as well in your later life, right? I mean, you've had your challenges, of course, and we all know the sad story about Ruth. Tell us how that's affected you. Yeah,
well, look, I mean, I suppose for the majority of my life, my focus was on cricket, really, and you think that's an important thing in your life, and you sort of commit yourself to achieving those goals. And then Ruth got diagnosed with a rare form of non-smoking lung cancer in December 2017, and all that sort of that life you built and the things that you'd focused on and the things you thought were important suddenly just all come crashing down, really, and you just realize that there's so much more to life than what you do in a work context, and obviously the importance of health and the importance of family. And I made it sort of my mission over the period that Ruth was battling cancer to try and support her as well as I could, and then unfortunately having to deal with the prospect of death. Prepare, she was brilliant, just so courageous in accepting that was what was happening, and being able to talk about it and prepare her and me and the boys for what was to come. And then following her death, really, it was, I think I've had a massive different mindset. I don't sweat the small stuff. I don't worry so much about what people thought of me. I am more focused on the boys and the family element, and I really feel like there's a sort of, I don't know, an obligation for me to live a sort of purposeful life rather than one that's focusing on achievement all the time, which is perhaps what I did beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a massive upheaval. I mean, I remember we were talking about trigger moments that arrive, because it wasn't that long ago that she passed. So, these are still new experiences, I guess, in a way, right? And there were trigger moments that kind of brought it all back. And you were saying about sort of first Christmases and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ruth died, about 16 months ago or so now. So, her birthday, Christmases, kids' birthdays, it really does come back home. But I don't know if there's a better or worse way to deal with grief. It is an individual thing. I think the worst way to deal with it is just shut it all away and pretend it never happened, and never talk about it either yourself or with your kids. I know that is the worst way. But I think you've got to just sort of roll with it a bit and understand they're going to be, people say bad days. I don't feel like that's the right term. It's like they're remembering days where you're remembering Ruth, and you're realizing that element of your life, that part of your life that you built. And of course you're sad. And often you cry, and that's fine, and then you wake up the next day and you're not feeling quite in the same mindset. So I feel like generally we're not good at talking about death and grief in this country. I think it's something that people feel very uncomfortable about. People don't like to think about, and it's absurd, because we're all going to be touched by death and grief at some point in our lives, and probably a number of times, including obviously our own death. So it's something that we need to be better at and more open at talking about.
Well, I must admit, I had my sister passed away in January, and I literally came back from the South Pole trek for charity, and I managed to see her once in hospital before she passed. And then we've been in lockdown ever since. And this year for me has been quite a bizarre sort of a journey of, extreme isolation in the South Pole and incredibly grueling. Then sort of the sad passing of my sister, and then more lockdown again. And I must admit, I do tend to shut things out. I try to sort of say, well, I'm not going to be affected by that, but there isn't a release valve.
Yeah.
You almost sort of, it's like a pressure cooker. Sooner or later, you've got to open it up. Otherwise the thing's just, it's going to.
Yeah. And some people find that easier than others, don't they? I mean, I was lucky that I've had a lot of sort of professional help from, Jenny, who's a child grief and loss counsellor, and she's just been an incredible sort of, not a shoulder to cry on, but it's just an opportunity to debrief and actually say how you're feeling, and allow yourself to go there. So sometimes you just need help in doing that, I think.
And you've been working with, you say Jenny, that's she's from a charity, isn't she?
Yeah, so she does some work for the Ruth Strauss Foundation now, but she originally was working for a charity called the Angus Lawson Memorial Trust, and Ruth, we got put onto her by other people that had experienced grief in their lives, and she helped Ruth and I through the last sort of few months of her life, and then since then as well.
And you've continued to obviously the Ruth Strauss Foundation has come out of that as well. Was that Ruth's kind of desire to leave a legacy on this?
Well, I think Ruth and I definitely talked about it before she died, and we've got a sort of, a one page of A4 that Ruth jotted down some notes on what the foundation might be, and that's sort of our guiding document, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I feel it's an opportunity to create a legacy for Ruth and to keep Ruth's spirit alive. And, I'm very conscious of it being something that maybe the boys are proud of. And, Ruth was an incredibly sort of empathetic and caring person, very charitable person. So the idea of helping people that might not otherwise have help feels very in tune with her worldview. And, and so that's what we're trying to focus on, to really make a difference to people's lives.
Well, you do a bunch of cool stuff around that, and I know I've got some tickets to a lockdown event next Friday night, where apparently some pizzas are going to arrive, and we're going to have a bit of fun. What I'll do is I'll get the link stuck on the bottom of this for you, Nat, and then if people want to come and sort of get into that, then I'm sure we can point them in the right direction online.
Yeah, great idea. I mean, look, I think everyone's having to think differently about what this new world looks like for them and their businesses, and charities are no different, are they? So the idea of trying to find ways of doing fundraising in a different way and making sure we can offer a way of people having a good night rather than just sitting and watching Netflix all night, So, so virtual sort of dinner with pizzas and beers and a bit of entertainment, and should be good fun.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure we get the link on that. Nat, you must have another question. You've been sitting there brewing.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking. I mean, I've been really lucky that I haven't really had anyone yet pass away on me. So I was kind of like just listening really to what you both were saying. I I don't really believe in speaking too much when you don't have anything,
No,
really up
that's a
there
good way to
about
live
it.
your
It's
life, actually,
well, it's
yeah.
pointless. Like a lot of
You're
people
a bloody interviewer,
waffle.
Matt. You should have at least a question or two.
I've got some questions. This guy busts my balls every time. So, yeah, I want to know what it feels like to score a century at Lord's. That's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, funnily enough, I was very fortunate. I got 100 at Lord's on my debut, which literally is what you dream of as a kid, isn't it? Like one day I'm going to go out to Lord's. It's going to be my debut. It's going to be a full house, and I'm going to hit the ball through the covers and raise my bat, and everyone's going to stand up and applaud me. And that's literally what happened to me. So, it was quite incredible, but at the same time, almost unbelievable. I couldn't. The big thing for any England cricketers is to get your name up on the honours board at Lord's, to say you've got a 100 or a 5-wicket haul, and so to see my name up there, especially as someone that no one had ever really thought of as being an international class player, I certainly had to pinch myself. But the funny thing is, then you do it once and then it just becomes normal. Like that's what you're employed to do, to go out and get runs and get hundreds. And so that you only ever get it once basically. And then it's a bit more mundane after that.
I couldn't imagine it being mundane to score 100 at Lord's.
Well, it's, funny enough, but my point being that, as an opening batsman, that's what you need to do. So that if you score 100, you feel great, but there's almost a sense of relief that, I've done what I've needed to do, and therefore I'm not going to be dropped from the team. The first time you do it, it's like, I don't know if I'm capable of doing this until you do it for the first time. So there's a slightly different thing there, isn't there?
Well, I have scored the winning runs at Lord's batting with you, Straussy, at a JP Morgan event. So I can claim that one. And
exactly. And you're your technique was very similar to a test match batsman as well. I've got to be honest.
Well, actually, I know you remember that one, but the year before, I also scored the winning runs, and I scored it off your bowling as it goes. So I was playing against you in the first year, and scored the winning run off your bowling, having just run Varney out.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest,
for hogging the strike.
Yeah. I can see why you see that as a claim to fame, but it shouldn't be, because my bowling is literally the most embarrassing attempt to bowl that anyone could possibly have. So yeah, so don't be too pleased with yourself on that one.
No, I'll stick with the second year's claim.
Yeah. So I have got questions. All right. So what was your biggest lesson from playing sport professionally that's helped you in the rest of your life?
Good question. Well, there are just a few things that come to mind, so I won't just settle on one. The first thing is to achieve anything extraordinary takes a lot of hard work. It just doesn't just happen. And professional sport, like if you're wanting to be number one team in the world or the number one batsman in the world, well, everyone else in the world is trying to do the same thing. So you have to be able to do the hard yards. I think that's an obvious one. The second thing I would say is that professional sport, it's about resilience. It's about bouncing back. You're going to have in fact, as a cricketer, you have many more bad days than good. And so finding a way to, not get carried away with your highs and definitely not get carried away with your lows, I think is really important, to live a life on a level. And then the third thing I think is around that kind of, I suppose the sort of mindset, mental skills bit around kind of, and this is maybe just a very personal thing, but, I found I got great value out of doing things like mindfulness when I was playing cricket, like being able to quieten the mind down and get out of your own way. And I've sort of kept that going in later life as well, and especially when it came to Ruth's illness and everything that went along with that sort of cancer journey. That was invaluable to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you quieten your mind, do you like sit and listen to music, or do you exercise? Like, what's your, because it's so many different ways you can do that. Like you can walk with the dog, or you can, what's your sort of method that you use?
So I think generally I've just done mindfulness. So I've used like one of the apps, Headspace or Calm or whatever. But at the same time, you're right. I mean, there are probably different ways you do it. Like right at the moment, I'm meant to be walking my dogs who are looking very disappointed. They're just waiting for me to walk. But and going for a run and all that sort of stuff. So I think one thing none of us are very good at is sort of putting our own mindset to as something that we should be protecting and focusing on. It seems to be like the kind of last thing we think about, which I suppose is where we get into trouble sometimes.
No, I think it's probably right. And what about you, Nat? Do you have mindfulness moments? Do you just like sit there? Do you wear those headphones even when you're not doing a podcast?
No. Excuse me, I have to cough there. No,
I'm very much liking your sort of your background there.
It's cool, right? It's this green,
exotic,
green screen, yeah, and it's it's pretty cool. But no, in terms of what I do is I do a lot of Tai Chi. I've been doing Tai Chi nearly 25 years, and as part of that, we have some exercises which are so painful that you really can't think. So by the time you finish, your brain is so used to not thinking that it brings that into the rest of your life. So it's a little bit like holding a yoga pose, if you like. Yeah. And when your leg's burning, you can't think about anything except for the leg burning. So it distracts you from anything that you're actually thinking or were thinking before, you know. But I think having a piece of paper and a pen is useful because then you can actually just make a little note. If you are, you know, if you have switched your phone off and you don't want to, you know, entertain thinking about technology, because that's what happens with me. I work with tech all the time and it drives me crazy. So I like to remove myself, and some mornings I'll wake up, there's too much on the brain. There's so many things that are going on that unless I take that time and remove myself from what on earth I'm actually doing, it causes me all sorts of problems. You know, drives my business partner Mike crazy. Yeah, not Mike Tobin, Mike Briarcliff. So we're clear.
I can be your business partner, Nat.
Look, I'll give you a free hug.
You're lucky we're on this lockdown. I tell you, there's no chance of getting one of those, and that's the one. I tell you what, though, I reckon we found his little his weakness. You know that hidden weakness thing you were talking about there, Straussy. It's his green screen. It's the need for the green screen.
It is.
He's clearly feeling that's going to big him up there.
I quite like it. It puts me out there. Yeah, that's what I want my future view to look like.
It'd be not a bad view. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it ties in quite well with your microphone, which actually is not a virtual microphone. I wouldn't have thought, but it ties in.
A microphone, isn't it? It's a serious one.
It's not bad. It's not bad. But the thing is, when you get something nice, you're always thinking of the next thing. I bought this new screen, and I'm like, I can't imagine life without it. But now I'm thinking, well, what would life be like with a bigger one and a better or two of this exact screen?
Thing around the lockdown, isn't there? Like, I mean, because, well, literally, obviously, we've been locked down. I felt like we've sort of taken a break from that sort of consumerism thing for a bit, haven't we? And it makes you realise, actually, we don't want for much, really.
Not really.
It's true, actually. I mean, you know, I'm very sort of passionate about going to restaurants a lot and things like that, and obviously that's fallen off a cliff, and so got into making more and more exotic and elaborate meals at home. And you know, it's really interesting getting into a different kind of habit now. And we tried a delivery from I probably won't say where from, one of the main restaurants in London on Sunday night, and was massively disappointed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I won't say which one online, but I was just really disappointed. It was like, really? And it was 3 tiny little sort of main courses, 3 tiny little starters, and 2 desserts. It was 170 quid.
What?
And they charged £15 for delivery. And then they charged service, 13% service. So it cost me 200 quid in total. And it was like, really?
Yeah.
So
That's
I'm really
crazy.
into home cooking now.
But I think these breweries, though, I know you're quite near Marlow, aren't you? I was looking earlier, and there's a great brewery near you.
Rebellion.
Oh, yeah. I know the guy in the shop there, Phil, his name is.
Right.
Brilliant.
Well, so I don't live there anymore, but I used to live like 100 yards from the brewery. So we used to go on a Friday evening for a couple of quiet ones. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I remember.
What made you think of breweries, by the way?
Well, just thinking about the beer and like all these breweries like are suffering. Yeah, they've got all this beer that they could be making for people and selling it, but like, what are they doing? Like, you know, they're probably like, well, they'd be struggling, I think, right now.
Well, I think there's a lot of sort of flexibility in the way people are thinking at the moment. So people are putting out things like saying, if you're going to buy alcohol, rather than buying it from the supermarket, go to your pubs, which are probably open to an extent for takeaways. And if you're taking their stock off them, at least you're doing some good, because you're rotating the stock. Some of it might go off. Some of it, they just need cash flows. Whereas at the moment, you know, they're sitting there on a pile of stock they can't shift. So rather than just going to the supermarket, probably the pub might be even closer. So you can go to the pub, get some stock off them, take away, and, you know, it helps everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I can assure you both that I've been doing my bit for the brewing industry over the last because I've been drinking a lot of beer.
How are you keeping fit? Is the old beer gut coming up then?
Well, a little bit, because I was also training for the marathon, and then obviously that got cancelled last minute, so I haven't got quite the motivation I did to train. I'm not going to give you a shot on my belly, but it's not quite what it needs to be.
Well, that's a relief. So I'll be doing the marathon. Are you doing it again later in the year at the rescheduled date?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it goes ahead with mass participation, yeah, I will be. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there as well for that one. Absolutely. And I bought myself an electric scooter, so that I don't have to use the tubes in London as much.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
It's interesting. So they're now starting to talk about legalizing the use of electric scooters in town and stuff. And so I got one of those. The top of the range, does 40, 50 miles distance. So
wow,
nowhere
that's
I can't
cool.
really go. I could even come and see you guys out in the countryside.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously people are going to be, feel free. But it's good. Yeah, the whole public transport thing's interesting, isn't it? Like, people are going to try and avoid that if they can.
Yeah, I was thinking about it yesterday, and I think there are some tough times for the public transport, really.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know how we're going to actually get back into this, because it's impossible to socially distance on there. And I think we've just got to assume that we're going to get multiple waves of this. And eventually we build some sort of herd immunity. You know, we come out with vaccines, but you go on, you know, it's not the only thing you catch on a tube. You can catch, you can catch anything on the tube. You're that close.
Gross.
Yeah.
Awful.
Wow.
So
look at you sitting there with the mountains in the background.
Yeah.
My business partner, he spends a lot of time in the Alps. So I just wish I'd been skiing a bit more, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
But
so I think, have you got a closing question for us then, Nat?
Yeah. So what would you? I was going to say, Andrew, what advice would you? Well, not advice, but what encouragement would you give to people that are really going through some tough times right now?
So I think the first one, I mean, it's easy to sort of fall into cliches, but like, I mean, you've got to try and find someone to talk to about whatever it is you're going through. And often it's not friends and family, actually. I mean, sometimes it is, but often it could be someone outside your immediate group that you can kind of share that problem with. And then, I think there's a realization, and probably something that we get caught up in too much, ultimately, that sometimes we we fall into the trap of thinking everyone else is having a great time and we're not having a great time. You know, you look at people's Instagram feeds and everything, and, you know, I just an understanding of, you know, life can be tough. And so just an acceptance of that, like, you know, I think back to how Ruth was with her cancer, an acceptance of life can be tough at times. And this is a challenge you need to get through. You know, that's actually one of the areas we gain meaning in life is by overcoming challenges. So it's trying to maybe shift your mindset a bit into that sort of mindset, I would have thought.
Yeah. No, that's very wise words. I think it's always useful to have someone to talk to. And you're right. I mean, you know, trying to teach a family member how to drive or something is not going to work, right? So having a sort of a conversation where you can really get to the bottom of emotions. Emotions are very often deemed as weaknesses. So, you know, you're laying yourself bare essentially to someone, and it's important you can do that, but it probably is important that it's someone perhaps that you perceive as not going to judge you in any way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a very difficult time for a lot of people, I think, you know, but we do definitely build knowledge, right? We build experience, and those are the things that become tools for the rest of our lives, right? I mean, because a lot of the time these things happen again and again, don't they? A lot of these challenges that we go through. So, you know, being able to sort of cope with your emotions is like when you're young, it's really tough, right? But you kind of, I don't know, you get better at it, don't you? I think, you know, certainly I've noticed a lot of people I've spoken to just, you know, they get much better at it the older that they get, really, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as kids are very emotional, aren't they? So they get stuff out a lot if they're feeling, you know, tired or angry or happy or whatever. I think as adults, we get better at masking that. Whether that's a healthy thing or not is another question. You know, sometimes masking it really does lead to trouble. You know, I think that
Good point.
We should be challenging ourselves to feel like we can go there sometimes in the right circumstances with the right people around you. I don't think that's an unhealthy thing.
Yeah, I agree with your approach to not bottling these things up, because then it's kind of like you have a boiling point, don't you? And sooner or later, something's going to get thrown at you and take you over that limit, and then you really will kind of explode, you know, with your emotions, really.
Yeah, I agree completely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute joy. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I've got to now try and locate my dogs that have sort of disappeared to the other side of Hampshire.
I thought it was sitting there, you know, sort of very, very sort of obediently at your feet, or you know.
No, I think I saw them running off after a deer, so they might never come back.
You'll be all right.
Lunch.
But before you go, I wouldn't mind just doing a quick video. Let me just stop this one.
Okay.
The intro.
Thanks for listening to Positive Personal Power. Do subscribe via your favorite podcasting app, and please leave us a 5-star review. Or sign up on our website, positivepersonalpower.net, for weekly emails and updates, and do share our episodes with your friends and on social media. Feel free to reach out anytime.